So, if you're feeling stuck in your life and have no clue why you're still stuck, whether it's with money, job, relationship, or basically life in general, whatever you do, listen to today's episode. Welcome to Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. This is your host, Padma Ali. And in today's episode, we're moving on to the much-awaited theme on self-worth. I will be sharing 2 simple steps to work with self-worth issues that you didn't even know you had. Yes, self-worth issues are often hidden. So welcome to this podcast episode. And even if you don't have these issues right now, it's worth a listen because I am sure you're going to get something from this. What's up, visionaries? Welcome to episode number 17 of the Create Your Vibrant Life podcast. Today's episode is it's so near and dear to my heart because I have struggled with this personally for many, many, many years. And the topic of today is self-image. Your self-image is causing you to stay stuck. So here's the thing. You may or may not have even considered what exactly is self-worth. You know, when I was doing this episode, I was researching how do you even define self-worth? The dictionary codes self-worth as the value one assigns to oneself. Man, I can't speak today. So let me start by asking you, what value do you assign to yourself? How much do you think you're worth? Just sit with that for a moment, will you? If you're like most people, there may be many areas in your life where it feels like, not many, maybe some areas in your life where you feel like it could be different. Maybe you aren't making as much income as you would like, or maybe your relationship is not where you want it to be, or your health is just, there could be some improvements in it. Or here's the other piece. There may be something missing spiritually. There may be a seeking quality of spirituality in you. Now, on the surface, you may or may not even connect any of that with self-worth, but stay with me because throughout this episode, I'm going to show you the connection and also give you 2 very practical steps to work with self-worth. So let me explain. Let's say, for instance, or for a minute, just imagine with me, right? You have a high-power job or you're a very successful entrepreneur. And let's say you have a family that you're balancing your work life with. Let's also say that your state of emotions range from really loving your work and loving what you do to being stressed, overwhelmed, frazzled, guilt for not spending enough time with your family. You're working really long hours. And it's all amplified right now with COVID, I'm sure. And your mind is occupied with work. And it often feels like you just don't have enough time. On the outside, it might show up as annoyance, frustration, losing your patience over the smallest things with your kids or someone who cuts you off on the road or something like that. And here's the piece you may have not even considered. Anytime you're trying to control your environment, you know that it's coming from a place of fear, don't you? Now, you may already know this. Fear and self-worth go hand in hand. Yep, anytime you have fear or you're caught up in these negative spirals of emotions like anger, frustration, annoyance, feeling frazzled, overwhelmed, working super hard. Yep, they're all connected to self-worth. I'm going to connect all the dots for you very quickly here. So stay with me. And the other piece that you may have, again, not even considered is fear. Whenever you are under fear, right? Like fear means you don't think you can make it happen. Fear means you don't trust and believe in yourself. Fear means that you have to work super hard. And what is this fear really about? Fear comes down to how do you see yourself making something happen or not? Does any of this sound familiar to you? And if you're like, no, I can't resonate 100%. I'm not sure. Or like, this is not really true. You don't really know my job, Padma. You're not running my business. And any of these things are coming up in your mind, just stay with me. Yeah, I'm not in your shoes, but I know this state of mind. I really know it. Why? Because I've worked with hundreds and thousands of clients until now, and many of my high achieving clients have struggled with that, and I have also struggled with it. And if I have dealt with something, the chances of you dealing with it are probably pretty high. I used to be that. I used to be so driven. If you'd seen me in my 20s, oh boy, was I driven. I even had a mentor at that point ask me. She was coaching me, not coaching, she was my supervisor because I was getting my hours to be a psychotherapist. She asked me, what's the hurry? That's exactly what she said. So Jackie asked me, what's the hurry? I graduated with 2 masters. I was on track on getting my therapy license, my psychotherapy license by the time I was 24, and really on this fast track. I was on this train. To nowhere. Now I know that in my 40s when I look back. But I was on this fast track to God knows where. I had all these visions. I was like, I am going to be licensed by the time of 24. I'm going to have this private practice. I'm going to have these 2.5 kids, a house, a dog with, like picket fence, like all these, the so-called American dream, right? I had it all planned in my head. Nothing wrong with that. Is there anything wrong with that? Absolutely not. But here's the piece I want you to consider. And you may resonate with this 100%. It felt like time was running out at that point. It was like, I have to do this right now. Like I had all these big dreams, aspirations, and I have to do it right now. It was coming from a place of lack. Not only that, I would get stressed out and frustrated when things wouldn't go as planned. I was controlling. I was really controlling, and control and fear, like I've said, often go hand in hand, don't they? It was like, it can't happen. I have to make it happen. I have to force it to happen. And big dreams, aspirations, is that a bad thing? Absolutely not. In our society, we often value hard work. We value aspirations. We value big dreams. But here's what you might have not considered. What's driving all of this? What beliefs are driving this push to make something happen? What causes somebody to be so driven? What are the beliefs? What are the stories that this person is carrying, right? And I had to do a lot of introspection, and I'll go into that a little bit later in this episode. But here's what I've seen in my years of working with people, with helping people transform their lives. Most of these types of people, like the ones I've described until now, like many of my clients, or even me, are internally driven, meaning no one is wrangling your hand behind your back to make things happen. You can relate to that, can't you? They want more from life. They're visionaries. They're really good at what they do. They have good intentions. People think very highly of them. They're valued. They're often liked for their personal work and their work in the world. They make things happen. And if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're this type of person. Again, nothing wrong with any of that. It's actually, these are good things. But what I'm referring to is what's driving that. What is the underlying belief or push that's making you do these things? You see, if you're like most people, you probably haven't even paused to consider that. You might have heard this saying or this quote, like, we go to sleep in our teens. And then when we wake up, it's like we are 50 something. Like all these years have just gone by because you're on this rat race. You're just like doing things, doing. By the time you wake up, you're like, oh my God, like half my life is already over. I'm totally butchering that quote or that statement, but it's almost like we've sleepwalked our entire life. For what? Why? What is giving us that push to make some of these things happen? And I see a lot of that in women, especially, that they're trying to prove something, either to themselves or to people around them. And we're really living our life too busy thinking about what we should be doing versus what we really want. sooner or later, you're going to realize that what's driving all of that is how you see yourself, your self-worth, your hidden self-image. That's what's driving all of that. Like something in you is pushing you. If it's coming from a place of going with the flow, I have this vision. I'm driven towards making that happen. I want to help a lot of people. I'm going to do this because it's my dharma. It's where I'm coming from. That's very different. But if it's coming from a place of, you will know this internally. It's coming from this place of wanting to, there's this drive that doesn't make sense to you, but it feels very forced. You're overworking. I'll explain the how that shows up on the outside. There's a sense of like you don't have any time for yourself. I'm going to share with you an example of a client, and then it'll make sense to you. But for now, I'm really inviting you to consider, like, how do you see yourself? What's driving that if you're in that category? There was this famous, or maybe not so famous guy, quote by John Assaraf. I don't know if I'm even saying his name correctly. He's the brain guy. He also came in that movie, The Secret. He says this quote, "You can never outperform your hidden self-image." You can never outperform your hidden self-image. Makes sense, doesn't it? Can you see how powerful this statement is? You can never outperform your hidden self-image. So let me break it down for you. Stay with me, okay? I know sometimes in these episodes I meander, but I will connect all the dots for you. So stay with me, and then I'll also share with you the 2-step process of how do you work with self-worth. So for a minute, just imagine that you valued yourself really highly. You saw yourself in really good light. So how will you know whether you value yourself or not? I'll share that in a bit in this episode. But if your self-worth is super good, then you probably are not bothered by external circumstances. Like, for example, there are many people who think that, oh my God, the economy is going to crash. What's going to happen? How am I going to make ends meet? But I know plenty of people in my life who are very successful entrepreneurs or very successful business people, or even in the workforce, who 100% know that they can make, that money is never going to be an issue, and economy going up or down doesn't make any difference to them. And they just continue on with life, right? It doesn't affect them at all. And there's a sense of peace that no matter what's happening, it's okay. There's a belief for these people who value themselves very highly that they are resourceful, they'll figure it out. There's no self-doubt. There is just pure trust that no matter what life gives you, it's going to be okay. You'll figure things out. And there's no underlying push to have to prove anything to anybody. It comes from a place of service and knowing that you're doing the best you can. There's just this level of peace. The inner chatter basically just disappears. And it comes down to what you're telling yourself, doesn't it? My goodness, I just told you that I'll tell you what positive self-worth looks like in a little bit later, and I just spilled all the beans to you right now. But this is it. This is the gist of someone who has very positive self-worth. This is how they value life. At least this is my interpretation. This is how I've seen people who I think have really high self-worth, self-esteem. This is how I see them operate in the world. So just take that in for a minute. Is that you? Is that how you see yourself? Or does it come from a place of, oh, I don't know how I'm going to do things. What's going to happen next? Or the chatter in your brain. Okay? So now imagine that you have hidden self-image issues. Like you don't think very highly of yourself, or you think that you're not good enough. I'm not worthy. Now, we don't walk around talking like that. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. But it shows up on the outside. My sister used to be that way. I'm sure she won't mind me saying this. She even hired me to coach her. That's a different story. I'll tell you that. I literally fell off my chair when she asked me. I thought she was joking because I'm her little sister, right? And I was like, you must be kidding me. Or I thought she was literally joking. And she's like, no, I'm serious. And she even sent me a check because she knows how much I charge. And she's like, yep, here's your check. I'm signing up with you. I don't want to work with anybody. I want to work with you. So we did. We did work for 3-4 months, and it really transformed her life. And so she used to be that way. She used to work so hard, and she still is. I'll share her story. Hold on. So she used to work very hard. She would not slow down. She would not sit down. There was always a state of activity of doing things, and more so for others and less than for herself. The result, she was very tired, exhausted. And because she couldn't go internally to see what was happening with our work, she looked internally. What was driving that? What was she avoiding inside? And eventually she realized that it all came down to what she was telling herself. What was the beliefs underlying that? What was the story she was telling herself about her self-worth or what she was doing in the world? There was this feeling of, I'm not good enough. It wasn't true. It was so hidden that she didn't even see it. And when we cleared that up, she really could see we cleared up the energetic imprints holding these beliefs together. And she could see that was nothing to do with her self-worth. That was just an old story that she had carried for a long time, which wasn't even true anymore. It really changed things dramatically for her. Maybe one day I'll have her on this podcast. You'll have to differentiate my voice from her voice because we both sound exactly the same with just a little bit, our intonations are different. But I might have her. She even did a testimonial for me, and she talks about these things very openly. Her work improved. There was a sense of peace. She was more present with her family, with her husband. Things really changed on the inside and outside in the process. Here's the beauty. She's still very busy. But she does things for herself now. And it comes from a place of putting herself first in the map. The day you start putting yourself first in your map, you know that you value yourself highly. And she takes time for herself without compromising her own needs. That's when you know it's really shifted on the inside. Her story of struggle is not uncommon, is it? Especially for women. I used to have the same story. You can totally relate to it, can't you? Especially if you're a visionary, because there's this inner drive that you can't explain, and then you keep doing and doing, and then you're like, oh my God, why the heck am I so exhausted? And I can say that about myself too. I would have continued on that train wreck had I not fallen sick for all those years. That was my first experience with awakening. And that's for another episode, but I would have been on that same track had I not been forced to slow down. Here's what you may or may not have already seen in your own life. When you do not live in alignment, the universe will give you circumstances and provide you experiences that will make you stop and learn your lessons, or it's going to keep making those same experiences in different form come into your life if you don't listen the first time. I'm chuckling because, God, there are some lessons I have to learn over and over and over and over again. I recently had the same there was something I was struggling with, and I was like, oh my God, I thought I worked through that shit. Pardon, I don't usually swear, so bear with me. And I'll share more about that at a later time. But I was like, can I not learn my lessons? Have I not learned my lesson enough? Why do I have to go through these same things over and over again? I'm sure you can relate to it. So I have to check myself very often, make sure I'm not working too much, or if I'm working, there are times where you will have to work a lot. But what is driving that? That's what I'm inviting you to think about. And when I find myself, for me, the pings are from my body. My body will tell me if I'm starting to notice overwhelm, if I'm starting to notice anxiety, if I'm starting to notice feeling frenzied, if I'm starting to notice feeling short with my kids, I know that something else is driving it. And that's my clue to stop. Hopefully, at some point in my life, I won't have to go through that in order for me to stop and pause, and that'll become more of a habit. I'm not there yet. It's something I have to work on. Like this last week, I just launched my group relationship program, which is going really amazingly well. And I was doing too much leading up to it. I loved every bit of it, but my energy system needs breaks, and I didn't give myself enough breaks. Now, the next time I do it, I know I'll inbuild some of those breaks in between, but I noticed a crash. And that's when I know, oh, where am I going? What's happening? Time to pause. Now, for me, it's not as much driven by self-worth issues anymore. At least I don't think so, unless I still have some hidden self-worth images that I haven't paid attention to. But it's coming more from a place of I still have a little bit of, time's running out. Time's running out. And I have to watch for that and say, no, I'm exactly where I need to be. And things are going exactly where they need to be going. And that's something I'm inviting you to consider and think about. Like, what is driving that? So anytime you start to notice your energy crashing, feelings are a great indicator of what's driving that. It's time to pause and really take a look at that. Anytime you're grasping, anytime you're not allowing, anytime you're forcing, you know that you're not in the flow, don't you? That's my invitation for you to stop and think about. And that brings me to our 2 steps on how to work with self-worth. Because in my mind, all of this is tied down to self-worth, and I'll explain why. The first step is awareness. And it starts by observing your own self-talk, your inner chatter. What are you telling yourself? Have you considered that awareness is the key to all of that? I'm wondering if you knew how much your thoughts would create your reality, you would pay attention to what you're thinking, wouldn't you? So our thoughts create reality. That's for another whole episode. I'm not going to go into that here because we'll be here for another 5 hours if I did that. But inviting you to really think about this. Your thoughts create your reality. So you would pay attention to your thoughts, wouldn't you? And self-talk is you talking to yourself, your thoughts. So if you're thinking, I can't do this. I have to finish all of these things. I'm not a good mother. I can't, I don't know how I'm going to get all of this done. Any of those negative self-chatter that may be coming from a self-worth, how you see yourself. So in your journal dedicated to this podcast, again, if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, please go back and listen from the start. They don't build one on top of the other, but there's a lot of nuggets that I share in the previous episodes that will help you get to where I am right now. And I've invited anyone who's listening to this podcast to keep a journal dedicated to this and start to take notes. Because repetition is how we learn. And when you take notes, it's something about physically writing things down that solidifies information in your brain. Start by writing in your journal, what stories are you telling about yourself? When you start to write down your stories about yourself, it will reveal to you your beliefs. When you change your thoughts, you change your life. Have you considered that? If you're like most people, you're going to be like, yes, I totally get it. I'm going to start paying attention to my thoughts about what I talk to myself about myself. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Basically, your self-talk about yourself. You'll be like, yes, I'm going to do this. And a few days later, you're back to your old ways. Now, I'm not being pessimistic. I'm not saying I don't believe that you can make changes. I know you can, which is why I'm doing this podcast in the first place. But I know human behavior and mind after studying it since, 1993? Yep, it's been that long since I've been studying human mind. It's going to take time and practice and changing habits. That's what's going to help you create the more fundamental change. So, which is why I'm inviting you to write it all down, to keep a journal, to keep track, to really make that a habit. Because when you dedicate yourself to making those big shifts, small shifts, it starts with small shifts that create the bigger shifts, you will start to see how life can be transformed. Very quickly, it doesn't have to take time. Because if it's taking time, that's another thing you're telling yourself. Everything comes down to what stories you're telling yourself. It's going to take me very long. I've had this thing for so long. I can't do this. And that brings me actually to the second step. Becoming aware of your hidden self-image. What do I mean by that? By now, you probably have realized that hidden self-image is much more of a hindrance to creating the life of your dreams than your outward, than your self-image about yourself that is already known, right? How do you bring that hidden self-image into the open? Now, you may or may not have noticed that the issues that you're least aware of are the ones that hold you hostage. The ones that you've written off as, that's just me. Like I used to say, I just love what I do. I am not going to charge that much for my services. I just love what I do. It's okay if I don't get paid that much. Yeah, that used to be me eons ago. There was a time, I have to laugh about this, that I used to charge, don't laugh, $25 a session. $25. I laugh because that was eons ago. And it came from me not valuing myself, my own self-worth. I would have thoughts like, who's going to come to me? Or, I'm not doing that much. I really like what I do. It's self-worth. That had nothing to do with what I was providing. So how do you bring these things out into the open? I don't charge that anymore, by the way. I charge good amount. Now I know what my self-worth is, and it's not even connected to self-worth. It is something that I know. I do it more because I know I'm providing a service, and it's a fair energy exchange that needs to happen. And if you are an entrepreneur, or if you are in the workforce and you're not getting paid what you deserve, and what you think you deserve is what you think you deserve. Let me leave it at that. Then it's very important that you look at your self-worth. So how do you bring it out in the open? Very simple. You may not like hearing this. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. Look at where your life is. Are you making the money you want? Are you in a relationship that you want? Are you even spirituality? Guys, I've had so many spiritual struggles when it comes down to self-worth, because I would have this belief that if the divine loved me, if the divine, God, universe, whatever you want to call it, really cared about me, then I wouldn't be struggling. Yeah, I'm again going to chuckle at this, but it would be that deep rooted. It was like, wow, if God didn't care about me, I don't use God at all because that's not my belief system. I go with more universe. I go with divine consciousness, whatever you want to call that. I had that, and that was connected to self-worth. It had nothing to do with the divine loving me or caring for me or not. I'm sharing this because I know many of you struggle with this, not just with connection with the divine consciousness, but I'm talking about how you see yourself and how deep-rooted these things are. If you are not making the money you want, if you're not in a relationship that you want, if your life is not where you want, if your home is not where you want, if you don't have something that you really desire, it is important. It's important looking at your beliefs, looking at what you're talking to you about your own self. What image are you holding about yourself? Remember this, you can never outperform your hidden self-worth. Wow, that's big, isn't it? You can never outperform your hidden self-worth. Now that brings us to the end of this episode. I know this was very powerful because when I had come to terms with it, when I really started to pay attention to this, when I really made it my life goal to just love myself the way I am and to create from this place of being okay with who I am, everything started to shift around me. Life really started to change, and I want that for you. So I know this is powerful. And I'm inviting you to sit with this. This is interpretation, hard work. It's my interpretation. It's hard work. It's a work that is, you can't just say, all right, I'm going to take a break from this today. It doesn't work like that. It's something you have to bring awareness to every single moment. And when you bring awareness to that, then things start to shift. Like this week, I was like, I am not working this week. I'm just going to take it easy. I spent the day hiking with my kids yesterday. We just walked around in nature. And here's the other piece. I'm just going to share this, and then I'm going to end for today. I used to not hire enough childcare because I didn't value myself. I was like, I should be able to do this. There's the should again. I should be able to do it by myself. And if I'm not spending enough time with my kids, then I'm not giving them what they need. But guess what? I was stressed out when I was by myself with 2 kids, young kids who have, my kids, I don't know about your kids, but my kids are super, super, super. They need a lot of attention. They want my attention all the time. There's someone calling out mama, 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 mama all the time. And I couldn't do it. And I was getting stressed and frustrated and annoyed. So now, simple thing. I have my babysitter come. I have childcare. I've covered childcare. When my husband used to travel, I wouldn't fill up childcare. And then I would get stressed running a business, taking care of kids, running a home. It was just too much for my energy system. I couldn't do it. But it had nothing to do with my capacity or my strength. It had everything to do with my self-worth. So I just started to make sure that I had enough provisions for support. So this week, even though I decided I'm going to spend time with them, I still had my babysitter come with me so that we could have attention. I could give each child the attention that they needed without feeling stressed out or overwhelmed. Simple, right? Simple. But it makes a huge difference. So my invitation. I'm sharing all this. I know I share a lot of my personal stuff. Somehow it feels more easy for me to share my personal stories because I'm there with you guys. I am no different. I am just maybe a few steps ahead, maybe a few steps back. I don't know, but I'm real. I just want to share what's happening, how I do things, in the hopes that it'll give you inspiration to do the same for your own life. So that's it for today. Share via your social media channels if you found this inspirational, which I know you did, and what inspired you. What are some of the nuggets you're taking from this? And what are you going to shift immediately? And share on Instagram. That's where you'll often find me at Padma Ali, and tag me because I would love to know, and I'd love to share and share your breakthroughs and celebrate you. So next week, we're going to talk more on self-worth. This is a very big topic, so I'm just covering each piece one at a time. And if you found this helpful, please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And if you can share it with other, write a review for me if you feel inspired again. And if you do, I work from Law of Reciprocity, INI, which is Ancient Income, Inkin, for the Law of Reciprocity, which is I want to reciprocate. If you are writing a review, I'll reciprocate by sending you a gift card and take a screenshot and send it to support@padmaali.com. So thank you so much, my friends. Thank you so much, visionaries, for being a part of this journey. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this podcast. Make sure to tag me on Instagram at Padma Ali to share your takeaways from this episode. And lastly, share with your friends and family so they can also benefit from listening to this podcast. For more tips, go on to our website, padmaali.com, and connect with me at the next episode. Take care. Bye.